The long-term plan for transportation in Southeast Michigan, plus a media progress report and a unique look at a small immigrant community in Detroit. Nolan and Stephen are set to join me, and my week starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hey there, and welcome to My Week. Glad that you could join us. I'm Christy McDonald. We have a full show coming up for you. We're taking on long-term plans for transportation in Southeast Michigan. We'll talk about that, plus a debate over media scrutiny, credibility, and perception since President Trump took office 6 months ago. And ending with one photographer's unique look at an immigrant community in Detroit. But we are going to start with the regional transportation plan that the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, or SEMCOG, is working on. So let's bring in our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
It's midway through the summertime.
Sort of.
Everything's pretty good.
Yeah?
It's kind of midway, July 20th,
right.
midway through.
It counts.
It does count, definitely. All right, so let's talk a little bit about transportation. And, SEMCOG working on these big plans. They talk about looking out to 2045 about what transportation should look like in Southeast Michigan. I want each of you to give me a sense of what you believe our transportation situation is in Southeast Michigan right now.
Well, clearly it's inadequate. I mean, we've got growing congestion on our freeways, particularly in the freeways leading to downtown. You've added thousands of workers to the downtown area without adding much parking and without really increasing the driving routes in. So something's going to have to happen. I think you're obviously not going to get much more in the way of rail, and certainly not going to get a subway, which seems to be everybody's pipe dream. I think the answer is some sort of combination of park and ride buses, high-speed buses, and these new sort of ride-sharing programs, Uber, Lyft, and others, to more effectively move people around in groups rather than in individual vehicles.
That's an interesting take. What do you think? Overall picture, how would you describe our overall transportation picture in
Well,
Southeast
I mean,
Michigan?
I agree it's not good. I don't think anybody, I've never met anyone who said it is good. I think we're still overly reliant on the mega freeway as solution.
By the way, the I-75 construction is going on strong in northern Holcomb County.
It's south too. It is downriver.
Yeah. It is one of the biggest wastes of money that I can think of. The day you open that freeway, it'll be full. That's happened with every freeway expansion, not just here, but around the country. But we just don't like to learn that lesson.
And yet
because we love our cars.
You cannot do that. I mean,
you can offer other alternatives, and our investment in those alternatives has been so bad that they don't compete.
But we made that commitment decades ago to do mass transit through freeways. I mean, we have mass transit. We put a massive number of people on probably the largest freeway network in the country. We have an obligation to maintain that. I think we need to add layers to it, but you can't just say, we shouldn't have done that, we're going to let it go.
Well, there's definitely a lot to take into consideration. So we wanted to get some more details about what this plan will achieve, what kind of reaction people are having to a long-term transportation plan. So I spoke with SEMCOG Executive Director Kathleen Lomako. Take a look.
All major metropolitan areas in the region have to have a long-range transportation plan that allows them to access state and federal funds that are used to support the system. So like other places, we have to convene all of the users of the system, all the owners of the system, to develop a long-range plan that allows us to make decisions and allows the system to work together, because various pieces of the transportation system are owned by different entities, whether it be the state transportation department, public transit agencies, local governments. They all have a piece of the system, and it needs to work together, and our regional plan brings all those elements together.
All right, so let's look at this regional plan that is going to span through 2045, which is fairly ambitious. What kinds of things are you looking to put into this plan? Explain that.
Well, one of the reasons you have to do a long-range transportation plan are these investments are long-lived. So we need to make sure that we're making the wisest investment. Some of the things that goes into it are how many people are going to be in this region, how many jobs are going to be in this region, where are they going to be located. And one of the new things in our transportation plan this time is we're really starting to grapple with what does technology mean for people's mobility. And all the talk about autonomous and connected cars, what does a transportation system need to have so that we can take advantage of those opportunities? It
would seem that making a plan looking that far out would be pretty difficult or very challenging, because when you talk about autonomous vehicles, or you talk about where the jobs will be and people getting to jobs, and sometimes we talk about, man, we may not even know what the jobs of the future will be in the next 5 years. So, so how challenging is it to be able to do that kind of long-range planning?
Well, we want to hear from a lot of people. We've got a lot of technical experts at SEMCOG. We work with University of Michigan on our population and employment forecasting. So we've brought a lot of great minds into thinking about what does the long-term future look like. That said, we know that there are forecasts that go into it, and there is some uncertainty, and that we revisit this plan every 5 years.
And when you open it up to the public, what are you expecting to hear? I mean, this is going to be a process now over a year where you're going to start to want to hear feedback from people in the area.
Well, what we want to know from them is, first of all, what are their priorities? Should we be investing in pavement and bridges? Should we be investing in technology? Should we be investing in freight? Should we be investing in transit facilities? All of those kinds of things, we want to know what their priorities are. The other thing we want them to tell us is, we've got a survey on our website where we want them to zoom in on a map and show us and point out the places where they experience problems, whether they be safety issues or congestion issues. Tell us what they experience on a day-to-day basis, because our region is large and we can't know every road in the region as well as the people who use it every day.
How long is this public comment section going to be open up for people?
Well, we've got a couple of phases. The first is this survey that's going on right now, which is on our website. We are also going to be having a series of public meetings. So we're going to be in each of the counties. We have 7 counties in our region, talking to individuals who want to come to a meeting. We'll be sharing our data and information and getting their feedback on that. And then ultimately, as the plan comes together, we'll come out again with what we're seeing.
And the plan, you know, keeps kind of moving and shaping and shifting as things change in the region. What kind of changes have you think that you've seen maybe in the last 5 years in our region when it comes to transportation?
Well, one of the things, we've done a household travel survey. We know that more of the trips are not related to work, that people are traveling more, there's more errands and activities that people travel to. And we know that peak hours, it isn't so much about peak hour travel anymore, it's about all afternoon the roads are congestion, where it used to be just morning peak and afternoon.
Yeah, the rush hour time seems to be changing a little bit.
Absolutely. And we think people have more trips than they did in the past. And the other thing we're seeing in our region is an increasing use of bicycles and just walking for some trips.
So that'll be something that you'll be taking into consideration as well, how that piece fits into other vehicle transit.
And what are the investments we can do to support that?
All right, so once you finally get then a newly crafted plan, people will wonder, where does it go from here? What will we see coming out of that final plan?
That plan will guide the investment in the transportation system. So it will guide the investments that county road commissions make, that transit agencies make, that local governments make. It really provides the framework for those decisions and makes it possible for those dollars to come into our region to support this system that is so important, not only to our travel, but just to our basic economic prosperity. People need to be able to move around the region.
So if you want to learn a little bit more about what SEMCOG is doing, we'll have all that information at our website at MiWeek.org. But this does not end the conversation, because when you talk about transportation as a whole, and she's talking about taking into consideration biking and walking and our freeway system, you have to have the conversation about mass transit. And we were talking just a little bit, you know, just a few minutes ago about where that next piece is and how community leaders are regrouping after things were voted down in the fall. Where are we now, Nolan?
Well, I like Coleman Young II's idea of putting people in two-person pods on electromagnetic sky
It's called a people mover.
and move you all over the place. I mean, that is innovative right there. No city in the country's got that, in the world.
No, they don't. That might be a little bit down the road from now. But Stephen, what do you think of it in terms about mass transit? What are we looking at in terms of regionally?
We have to keep trying. We have to keep coming up with ways to make it better. I think some of the objections to the proposal that was on the ballot in November have sort of ready answers, right? We can make sure that more communities are going to get things earlier. We can make sure that it spreads out a little wider. That's going to mean not doing some other things, but I think the one thing we can't do is just sort of say, well, forget it. We're not going to have anything better than what we have right now. This is not a region that's ever going to be able to grow, I think, again, without a better way for people to get around.
But the challenge here of planning out 20 years and 25 years is we have no idea what mobility is going to look like. Right. I mean, in 20 years, you've got to believe the whole self-driving phenomenon is going to come to fruition. How does that affect
that may be very different.
This idea for buses and what have you? And how do you incorporate that into a long-term plan? I think it's a lot. It requires a lot more sophistication and effort than was put into that first plan. I don't think we should be planning at all for these little buses that pick up old people and sick people and take them to the doctors. You can replace those with rideshare services if you have trained drivers and what have you, and you could perhaps save money. And you could also, if you took the Q line as it is and extended it to Birmingham or Pontiac and run it down the middle of Woodward all the way up.
I think we can all agree that running it down the middle would be
and then had stops where you have these rideshare offerings, so people can get the next 3 or 4 or 5 miles to their homes, or park and ride lots, what have you. I think you've got the start of a solution.
Is anyone talking about extending the Q line? I know we've talked about in general that eventually the thought would be to go all the way up to 8 Mile, but it took so long to get the Q line even in place.
Right.
So where are we in terms of that?
So there are secret drawings around town.
Secret drawings?
Of an extension that would go down Jefferson, which is actually your next logical extension because of the density that you have along that route, because of the commuting density between Grosse Pointe and downtown. And I would put my money, I suppose, on that being the next part of this. But you know, that's going to cost more than the 3.3 miles we just laid up Woodward. And the question is always, who's going to pay for that? I mean, if the Q line, I think the thinking is, if the Q line can prove its utility over time, you might convince taxpayers to foot the bill for the extension, because I don't think the people who paid for the Q line are going to come out of pocket for another $150, $200 million.
Yeah, you know, maybe they won't, but you know, maybe they will come up with some of it. That line was built far more cheaply than most public-built transportation systems for that length.
Actually,
so it's not. It's a good model.
per transit mile, it's terribly expensive.
It's a whole lot cheaper than what you've seen built in places like Boston.
$150 million for 3 miles?
60 million a mile. You compare that to what they've done in San Francisco, for example.
Well, that's with subways and stuff, though.
Even their rail lines and in other places. I mean, it wasn't out of the question expensive. Now, the challenge is there's not going to be a whole lot of federal money for this. So you've got to find creative ways to raise this money. If you could get a multi-county authority so that this thing stretches in to Oakland County and perhaps into Macomb and to Wayne on 3-4 major routes, I think you could build support for it.
All right, it's going to be interesting to see. All right, turning now to the media. That would be us. It has been 6 months since President Trump took office and heightened an atmosphere of mistrust in the media. Television reports, newspaper reports, the term fake news is still being thrown around. Has the news media done its best to gain the trust of the public, or is the public sinking deeper into their own political camps and viewing news as either left or right? It's time for a little self-analysis here, gentlemen. What do you think?
Yes to all of your questions.
Yes to all. Okay, well, let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next topic.
I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about this is that the hand wringing is going on while old line media are experiencing some of the biggest growth in readership that they've ever had. The New York Times
and the Washington Post
and the Washington Post are adding readers like nobody's business. Most local newspapers are also seeing smaller bumps than that. It really depends on the market and the reasoning. But there's what's good about that, I think, is that people are realizing that there is value in curated, edited, traditional media gathering, and that is different from a lot of the other things that we see that are out there on the media landscape that are dug into far more partisan and irresponsible spaces.
So you're actually just drawing the line. You're talking about print.
Well,
news media right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the medium I work principally in. So it's the one that comes first to mind.
And the least significant medium today. I think.
Do you really think that? Do you think print is the least significant?
Well, in terms of overall reach, yes. I mean, far more people will get their news from electronic sources than from print sources. I mean, that's why we've been struggling the last 20 years, and it hasn't shifted.
But most print media are electronic now, so
they have electronic formats. But people are still getting more of their news from cable television.
So you're talking about CNN. You're talking about MSNBC or NBC, CBS.
Yeah, Washington
ABC.
Post website is competing with CNN and BuzzFeed right now for page.
Well, yeah, because what's happening to CNN is
BuzzFeed
been a plunge. I think clearly folks don't trust us. They don't trust us whether we're print or whether we're electronic, whether we're cable.
Yeah, but Nolan, we said this after the election. I mean, we sat and we had a whole show talking about, so people say they don't trust the media. What has the media in general, and gosh, I hate just using that large blanket because it does break down in so many different ways, but what have we done to change that perception?
We've not even tried. I think we've made it worse since the election. I think we can't blame our readers or our viewers. We have not comported ourselves very well. We've taken every piece of bait the president has dangled. We have allowed him to draw us down to his level of behavior. The mainstream press, even the New York Times, Washington Post, are getting too many things wrong. They're having to correct too many things. They're relying on
I would
anonymous
challenge
sources.
you to document that in the Post and the Times.
I would say that they might have had
absolutely speechless.
CNN has had the problem.
The Times story about the 16.
They had one story that was wrong.
They've had other stories that have.
Can you show me what those are? I mean, seriously.
Wrong. They're over-reliant on anonymous sources, and the more you use anonymous sources, the less trust you have. We're just become too hysterical in our coverage and too obsessed. I've talked before about the hierarchy of scandal. We don't distinguish between a real scandal and, oh my God, the president said somebody had a nice smile, and people are starting to turn us off. I think we have to stick to our standards.
You're painting with a really
so I think that's kind of what what the problem is, because we could delineate between cable news, which is different than I think than even the network news that you're seeing at night, which is different from your local news, which you're seeing, and that's just television. But and I would not compare a local television news broadcast to what the Washington Post is putting out and to what the New York Times is putting out.
It's not nearly comparable.
You look at that stuff is creeping into Associated Press reports that bias the drawing conclusions instead of presenting the facts and letting readers drive. Because I'll give you an example. After the Comey testimony, the AP ran a story. Third graph says now the public has to choose whether to believe a FBI director with a long and distinguished career and credibility or a president who's known to be a liar. I'm thinking that's sort of drawing conclusions for the reader. Well, I think is what make people read it and say. I mean, that stopped me in the track, and I've been in the business for 40 years.
So I disagree because you have a president who has changed the way he communicates in a way that incorporates lying as an everyday tool.
You don't change your standards.
Hold on. Calling that out and pointing out that this is somebody who has a track record of untruthfulness is not bias. That's being truthful. You can't. It's
not our job to call out news stories. That's commentary.
It absolutely is.
That's opinion.
That's not
in
true.
News stories, we present the facts and let the readers draw.
But you have to give context. You have to give context.
And under this behind this curtain of giving context, you've got to make sure you're not presenting your own bias. And I've seen too much of it.
So what bias? I agree. What bias is represented by pointing out that Donald Trump tells lies?
Basically, you're saying, at that point, we didn't know whether Comey was telling lies. I think you can.
What it did was it compared the two records of the two men.
You don't have to. It was subjective. You do not.
Why is that subjective?
You do not have to say, well, gosh, we've got a guy who has this distinguished reputation, whatever, because in coming days, we found out maybe he wasn't so distinguished. I think that's the danger. You let the facts speak for themselves. And we've moved too much toward trying to push our...
Well, I do, hang on one second. I do believe you have to let the facts speak for themselves, but you also have to, when you're presenting these facts, you also have to bring back other reports and compare and say, this is why he said this statement. Like, things aren't happening in a bubble, and that's...
that's different than what I'm talking about. The other day...
Hang on, let him finish.
The other day, the AP ran a piece that said Donald Trump tweeted out that MSNBC is biased against him without presenting any evidence to prove that. For God's sakes, you only have to watch it. And how many times did Barack Obama say Fox News is out to get me? Right. You never had the AP say without presenting any evidence.
But I think what people had a problem with, Nolan, I think what people had a problem with, though, was the way he went after personally the people who had said that.
And that's a different issue than saying than characterizing his statement as saying and without presenting any proof.
A lot of what this
we have never done that before.
A lot of this
and I think we're bending over backwards to discredit.
A lot of this is a campaign of incredible false equivalency. And you have to start to wonder what the aim of that is. To compare a president who personally attacks everybody he considers an enemy, who says the most inappropriate things that he can think of, and who regularly lies to Barack Obama or to the media is really specious. I mean, there is no...
So hold on.
Hang on one second.
Standard?
Hang on. No. Hang on one second. Let him finish.
The standard is to point out what is happening and to put it in context. And there is no way to do that with Donald Trump without acknowledging that he is doing things and saying things that no other president has ever done. He is ignoring
Hang on.
It is entirely true. Name a time that Barack Obama ever called someone the names that this guy
there's no question in that.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying. Are we going to fall to his level?
But we're not doing that. Pointing out that he's doing it is not falling to his level.
I think you cover the things he's doing and things he says. They speak for itself. You don't have to add all of the personal conclusions and context.
It's not
okay. Well, no, I don't think people. Hang on. I don't think people are adding their personal conclusions. I think the blurring line is because you're hearing a Washington Post report on CNN, and then you've got 5 people who are talking about it, and people are disseminating that information, hearing people's opinions, reacting to a report. That's what I think is the continuing problem of how people are disseminating.
There's
the
factual conclusion is not biased.
There's a in that case, I mean, the facts are subjective, and the conclusion is subjective.
Are facts subjective? Our facts are facts. Facts have to be facts.
That is the campaign that is underway, is to make facts seem subjective. You sound like the White House.
Hang on, guys. We only have a short time left.
You sound like the White House.
There's a clear reason.
No. You have alternative facts.
No, he doesn't sound.
I mean, if you look at this. And the way and the relentless nature of this, where everything the president says or does becomes a huge scandal, I think
you have to be careful about who you're talking about.
I don't think it becomes a huge scandal, but the way he communicates is unprecedented.
Of course.
Is it unprecedented? And it is our job as the media to cover it. We do have to stop the hand-wringing.
The way we're covering him is unprecedented.
All right, and we're going to have to. We are going to have to continue this discussion at another time. We will continue the discussion. At another time, I'm going to have to leave it there.
Versus Jefferson.
We just ran out of time. I'm going to have to cut your mics. Thanks to Nolan and Steven, and of course, thank you to watching. Find MiWeek on Facebook and Twitter. Cut his mic during the week, and make sure you come back next Thursday and see us. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.